Just want to welcome everybody. Good evening. I just want to quickly go over the agenda for tonight, September 13th. I'm going to make quick introductions, and then Juan's going to go over the community survey, Jeff, the meeting today with Jim Stowe, and then we'll go into our conversation distilling the 64 ideas on our jam board, which are divided into three categories: youth and schools, AAPI community, cross community, and break that down. We started yesterday with a conversation on youth and schools facilitated by Nazneen, and Nazneen and May have graciously volunteered to do some more discussion. Outside of these meetings, we're fortunate to have a guest who can help us sort of elucidate some of what's going on in the schools to support that policy making process. And then we'll all lead the conversation on those ideas related to the AAPI community and cross community. I'd like you to all think about, what information do you need in order to begin to formulate policy recommendations? Since today, this is a 1.5 hour meeting. Toward the end of it, we're going to start to hopefully see some recommendations shape in our minds, and we'll continue to sort of distill those ideas. But in terms of information gathering, whether that's meetings with persons or offices, agencies, whether that's any research, it'd be good to articulate that so we can assign those and have that ready for input before the next meeting. And then we'll just close out with a couple announcements. Does anybody have any additional agenda items? Looking good? Okay. All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce Tanrika Chaudhry. Tanrika, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, great. So really fortunate to have her here with us today. She's president, Asian American Progressive Student Union. She was vice president last year. The Asian American Progressive Student Union is a partner of Mokopan, very proud. And just as some back history, OPSU, had taken the lead, a couple of years back when we were at the height of COVID-related bias incidents against Asian Americans, and Mokopan had connected them with the Equity Initiatives Office at MCPS. And we had a really wonderful listening session where students from middle school and high school really spoke about their fears going back to school in the fall, and also the sense of not having this event, the Atlanta shootings, which was a watershed event for the Asian American community. There was like 6 out of 8 women who were killed by a shooter. And that just sort of evolved into conversations about diversity in hiring and curriculum. And it was a wonderful conversation. It's actually recorded. If anyone is interested, happy to share that link. But these leaders took it upon themselves, did town halls in different schools, spoke with, the officials at the school district, the county council. And so I've been really taking a lead and formulated a platform from all that. So we're going to check in with Tanrika about the progress of that, and take the opportunity to ask her any questions as we're sort of formulating a recommendation that would be helpful, especially given the unique needs of Asian American students in MCPS. And Tanrika, just to let you know, that's one recommendation out of 5 or more, but our charge is to create 5 policy recommendations for the council. So with that, I also want to acknowledge we have another guest that came in. And so I just want to say welcome. Is it Urja?
Yeah, hi, thank you.
Yes, welcome. Are you a student at MCPS?
I'm the vice president of AAPSU.
Excellent. Okay, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Okay, Juan, hopefully you've gotten some responses from last night from us. And so how is the survey coming along in terms of clarifying those questions?
I did receive a few survey responses, so thank you to those who responded. I did not get a chance to go through the comments in terms of, because this is more of a survey test, right? Not a real survey, and just want to get comments and suggestions. So I haven't had a chance to go through those, but I will go through those later on tonight after this meeting. But I'm happy to open it up to see any of you have any general comments about the survey. You know, and also I'm curious to know whether you felt that any of the questions are not needed. You know, that we can eliminate to shorten the survey.
I think my comments were in the email. Definitely does not help to shorten the survey. There are some clarity things, but I did notice that many of the questions were posed in the have you experienced hate incidents as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? And it just felt very focused on as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It felt a little bit like narrowing. I think that the range of hate incidents is broader than just as a result. I think that has certainly created a spike. So I just thought it was interesting wording that made me pause a bit when I was taking it of like, what type of bias was that? Was it from the COVID-19 or was it just like generally because something else? So that was my feedback.
Yeah, I would agree with May too. It was kind of, I think that I think one question with regard to the COVID-19 would probably be enough. Just to say, do you think that, you know, go through the different types of things and then just say at the end, you know, do you believe that COVID-19 exacerbated, you know, the hate incidents and hate violence against the Asian community?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that general feedback. So I will certainly incorporate those comments. So appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Wait, any comments about the length? Do you feel that it was a little too long, or, you know, considering what we had to cover, whether it was an appropriate length? Did any of you time yourself or anything?
I didn't time myself. Sorry, May. But I think that I think the questions about what I experienced, if you're looking for what the community experienced, I think the questions about what I experienced they're too many. I think that if you're going for if you're talking to organizations about what their community is seeing or experiencing, I would really focus on that versus what you know, I personally experienced.
Okay, so you think it's better just to focus on what the community is experiencing? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think I would second that, because I think a lot of questions are kind of saying, what are you noticing among your community? And that was some of the specific feedback of like, am I supposed to answer this as an individual or as a observer, a leader of like the subset of community members that I'm in relationship with, so that you're kind of getting that broader scope from one lens.
Okay, well, that would definitely shorten the survey. So I appreciate that. I was very concerned about the length. So I think I would definitely eliminate the questions and just focus on the community questions. Thank you.
Thank you for putting that draft together.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to add is I do want to thank you, May, for putting that Google Sheet in there. I did populate a number of, you know, community organizations that we're planning to reach out to. And, you know, feel free to, if you see an organization that needs to be part of that list, feel free to insert it. You know, I try to put it alphabetically, but I did get a few more. And in addition, on Saturday from our, you know, event with Mokopan, I also got a number of volunteers to help follow up with some of those organizations, because they know people in that organization, you know, so they can give them a call, or, you know, just give them a call over the weekend or something. Hey, can you finish filling out the survey or something like that? Phone call, I think, is and leveraging those relationships will go a long way to getting those surveys completed. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
thank you, Juan. Oh,
All right.
go. Did somebody
Yeah.
have a comment?
Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Okay, just let us know if you cannot find emails or people to help you follow up, and with some deadlines, and we'll be good to go. Thank you so much, Juan. Jeff, with your indulgence, could we jump over you and come back to you? Okay, great. And so let's take advantage of the fact that our guest, Henrika and Urja, is going to be here till 7:35. So let us move ahead to the discussion on the youth in schools. And Nazneen and May, I know you have not yet had your conversation, but based on yesterday's conversation, are there any questions that have arisen that you'd like to ask our student leaders here?
May, you're on mute.
I got distracted by my 6-year-old who just popping in by. You might see the top of his head at some point. He likes to make these appearances. Sweetie pie. Thank you. I wanted to know from your perspective, from you just spoke of middle school and high school, what's working and deserves more investment, and what are the gaps that still need to be addressed? Just those two kind of overarching questions.
I can start first. I think from my end, one thing that's definitely been working is just hearing the youth voices a lot more is something that I feel like has been able to create a lot more change, starting from the APITA curriculum, where students have been feeling a little bit more represented and students are being more educated on Asian American history and the advocacy relating towards representing Asian Americans within social studies and history, English curriculums. I feel like that definitely does play a role in kind of just bias incidents, because students are more aware of what's going on, are given the opportunity to be educated a little bit more. But then on top of that, I think the professional development that has been given and that focus on hiring more POC teachers and staff members has definitely been something that I've seen within my own school, and I feel like Urja can also attest to that. Has definitely one thing that for me has been noticeable, and I feel like definitely does play a role in kind of being proactive and kind of representing the Asian American population. And then one other thing was definitely also mental health resources. I do see that sort of improvement from MCPS's side in improving the mental health resources and that availability for students to access those resources. But I do think that more outreach can be done towards it, just in making sure that each and every student is aware of it. I know for me and probably Urja as well, we're aware of those resources because in some ways we play a role in advocating for them. But going beyond that, making sure that us from AAPSU side, but then also staff members and MCPS officials just kind of work towards making sure that students who are not really involved in that process of getting these mental health resources are also aware that they can go to them and that they can access these resources easily. Yeah.
I think another question I have is, if someone experiences a hate or bias incident, what's the school's response? How is that played out if they come and they say something to somebody?
I think it varies very much school to school. Some schools are a little bit more proactive, while others I feel like could do a lot better in the way that they respond to these sort of incidents. I would say for me, I go to Poolsville High School, and we are informed if there's a hate bias incident. There has been many incidents last year where students were drawing the swastika in different school settings, on a bus or things like that. And they don't obviously say who did it and what happened, the consequences, but they inform that this incident has happened and the school is taking action against it and is informing not only the parents, but also students as well, why this is not appropriate and why it should not, this sort of hate bias incident should not happen again. So I feel like in those aspects, they take really quick action the day of or the day after. They inform us that some sort of incident has happened and it should not happen again. But of course, that I'm only speaking on behalf of Poolsville, and I feel like that Orja can probably speak on how RM, Richard Montgomery, kind of reacts to such things.
Yeah, I think for RM, it's mostly similar to Poolsville. They send out like mass emails to every student and make sure that everyone is informed of what's been going on. But like Tanarika said, the details of the incidents are left out. But I think more than just the school sort of taking action, it also stems from the student, right? If I think a lot of students aren't actually reporting what's been happening to them, like hate crimes and other things. So I think a lot of students are scared to do that. So I think if we can aid them in any sort of way to like make it anonymous and just sort of help them feel comfortable doing that, I think it would help a lot of people.
That actually brings up my next question. I was at a parent orientation and they were talking about the MCPS Stronger Student app. And they said that this was an app developed by students to connect students to both crisis management, mental health resources, and to anonymously report any type of bullying incident. Have you guys heard of this?
No, I have personally not heard of that app.
Okay.
I haven't either.
But it sounds like a great one that I would wish there would be more outreach towards, and would love to like see more of it or see people use it more, be able to know about it.
I will drop a link in the chat in a sec, just so that you as leaders have it, because it seems like the word hasn't gotten out yet.
I'm just wondering, what are some of the gaps that you see when you're talking to students? What are some of the gaps that you all see that students are experiencing, or that you think need more attention by either the school district, the MCPF, or by individual schools?
I can start with it. I think one thing would just be a little bit I think a gap that I've definitely been seeing is within the anti-racist audit. A lot of people have been hearing about this audit, but I feel like there's not been much more like clarity towards the students specifically on what the results were. And I know that's not specifically a gap. It's been a pretty successful study, but I think students have been hearing this term a lot, but really don't know what it means. And I think one gap that we could definitely solve with just a little bit more outreach is just what this audit was and the results of it and what we're doing based off of that. Urja, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think awareness is definitely a huge gap, like you said, with the app as well. I wasn't aware, Tanarika wasn't aware of such things, and I think that these things, especially related to like mental health, can really help students. So I think as a PSU, we can definitely sort of advocate for that and raise awareness. I think that's kind of it.
I think there's been like a significant improvement in a lot of the gaps that we noticed, like even like as a freshman in high school, a lot of gaps that we kind of focused on. A lot of like issues that we focused on, we're seeing a lot of change within them. So as like a senior, I feel like there are a lot more improvements, but there is some things that I feel like if we're just being a little bit more like creating a little bit more awareness about it, it could definitely make such a big impact in various issues. Yeah.
And sorry, just one last question. Are there peer groups at each of the high schools where individuals can go and talk about the issues that they may be experiencing?
So there's definitely like clubs that people have started for so like Asian American unions, which are school-based, and I think a lot of those clubs just sort of advocate for awareness and just have our like community groups that people can just talk in. But I think AAPSU is sort of like the bigger version of that, just like all over Montgomery County. So I think
just adding to that, I think a lot of the clubs at schools definitely do create like a space where people can discuss about Asian American issues or just issues that they are facing within school, if that has to relate with like any bias incidents they're facing or anything like that, just peer groups to discuss. But as AAPSU, we have been leading like town halls and sort of discussions on different topics. For example, we've had like safe space discussions specifically on AAPS students who are ESOL students, and sort of like the kind of creating a community setting where they're able to discuss the issues and difficulties that some people have faced. And like similar examples of those we've held in the past and are planning on holding. So there are different opportunities for students to definitely be involved in such discussions.
And we also have cultivated like a demands list, so I can put that in the chat. But that's basically all the disparities that AAPS have sort of noticed, and that document has been added to by ESOL students and a lot of other students during our community calls and safe spaces. So I think that could help as well. I'll just link that in the chat.
And I have one last, or maybe two questions. Sorry, May, I know I see your hand going up. One is, oh my goodness, I can't remember. So one is whether or not, if you had one recommendation, what do you think that would be? That's one thing. And two is that have the schools or has your group done any bystander intervention training?
I guess wait, what was the first question again? Sorry, there's like two.
I know, sorry. So let's flip back at it. First of all, has your group done any bystander intervention training to sort of talk to students about if they see something, how they can respond?
No, we haven't.
And then the second question is, if you had one, if you had sort of one, you have a wish list, but there's only one thing that you could choose, as a recommendation, what would that be to MCPS or to the county council?
I think it would be a little bit more awareness just on different topics of general. Like, I think not many students know about the resources that are available to them. And as much as we are able to advocate to the students, I think it's really important if it comes from like teachers in like mass emails, if possible, that there are resources available from mental health to recent advancements and how like data is being represented for AAPS students, or even like the possibility of like, or like telling about the increase in Asian American representation within the curriculum, like social studies and history courses or English courses. I just think being like having more outreach on these issues and kind of the improvements that MCPS is taking will ensure students and give students that sort of comfort that they have the resources and are being represented more within MCPS. Urja answers that.
Yeah, I think just to put it under like an umbrella term, I think student support is most important. I feel like many AAPIU just feel like they're sort of invisible when they're in schools or even like classrooms. And I think just like having that greater like community just within your school can be really helpful. So making sure that we're talking about racial equity. So not just for AAPI students, I think overall, just in classrooms, we can have a lot more conversation about racial equity, just making sure that each student has a space to talk about issues that are important to them, especially after like if there's like a shooting event or something like really that affects a lot of students mentally. I think that's something important to talk about, and just encouraging those connections between students will be really helpful in sort of developing like a community that's just really aiding a lot of people.
So the one question I had was, I hear APSU as being a key group that kind of brings some of these disparate schools, clubs, ideas to this one space. What are there more resources, trainings you wish you had at your disposal?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I think having like different trainings and different events, definitely like from a youth aspect, like there's so much that we can do. Like obviously we can testify, we can advocate, we can create groups, but conducting trainings and conducting like bigger scales, having that support from MCPS as well would really enable us to also be able to reach even more students than the ones that we have already had. But yeah, I think that bystander intervention training is something that we would definitely want to hold, but it is hard to do that just from a few students. So it's something that we would be definitely interested in if there was like more support for it.
And part of our demands list was also cultural competency training for teachers and mental health workers in schools. So I think that like if teachers are trained and other mental health workers are trained, it would make it easier for the students, obviously. And I think the bias that people face that we were talking about, I think is sometimes really largely ignored by teachers. And I think if they're trained to address these situations, it'll help the students sort of speak out and make sure that MCPS and their school administration knows about the hate crime that occurred, or whatever went on.
I have a couple of follow-up questions, and you talked about having an interest in MCPS sharing more resources like the anti-racist audit. What is usually the best way for MCPS to get that information across? You mentioned mass emails, but I imagine, is that district-wide? Is that school by school? And then similar to that, what is the best way for API community organizations to reach students with that information?
Yeah, I think on an MCPS level, I would say like emails, maybe posters that students or that the schools can put up within their school would be definitely helpful, like large posters that can be placed, maybe like 2 or 3 of them across a school. And then also just like Instagram. I think a lot of students follow that MCPS official Instagram, and if we're able to post on that about different resources, it would definitely help give a little bit more awareness and outreach towards certain things that MCPS have been working on.
So I think like 2 things. One can just be MCPS forwarding like emails or resources to each individual schools, and then asking the principals or the administration to just distribute that to school SGA or PTSA so it can reach a larger group of students. Or maybe even Asian American school clubs that we mentioned. Sending emails to those clubs can really be helpful. And then the second thing, I think MCPS has, like Tanarika said, a really great reach on Instagram, but not just making posts that are heavy on content. I think making posts that are engaging and maybe have some sort of like incentive for the people to watch, right? So maybe hosting an event where we mention these resources where people get SSL hours, or so like I said, like making reels that are engaging with like good imagery and music, audio, whatever, just so that people actually want to watch this reel. And it's just not that, I think maybe MCPS has these resources and is maybe even publicizing it, but the audience that is reading it is not understanding the content, and it's not understanding like what's going on, and it's not really having access to the resources. So I think making sure that, one, you are pushing those resources to people, but are people really engaging with it, or are people really understanding like what's happening, right?
Yeah, and I see a follow-up question from May in the chat. Could bystander intervention training count toward SSL hours? Do you mean if the students organized to have those trainings made available? May or you mean
Or
to
even
them?
just following up on Urja's point, if what I was hearing was, would students be able to get SSL hours by engaging in some of the content that's important for students to see? So I saw that as, I'm hearing a need for bystander intervention training, and I'm hearing an incentive of SSL hours for attending such trainings, right? Like, are trainings like that typically counted toward SSL hours, or is it straight like it's service projects out in the community?
No, I definitely think that it could count towards SSL hours. I think there was one training that students were required to complete about like bullying a couple of years ago, and from that everyone got like 1 or 2 SSL hours. So I think if we were able to host like a bystander intervention training, we could definitely associate SSL hours and get a lot of people, because everyone is looking for opportunities for SSL hours.
Thank you. Yes, I
This
get
is
those
aside
requests a lot.
from our thing, but our the organization I work with, we've been doing some bystander, like some anti-bullying training and stuff. So I'm going to put my name and email in the chat. So if you all want to, if you're interested, you can reach out to me, and I can see if that's something we can help you with.
That would be great.
Piggybacking, Tenrika, on, let's see, what were we talking about here? Oh, I know. Yesterday we were talking about anti-bullying efforts, and are they systemic enough, meaning involving the entire school community, even if it's at an individual school, and are they sustained, long enough so that the lessons really seep into the climate where people are really actualizing those principles, or are they kind of one-offs, or do you have any ideas on how to support that kind of effort moving forward if it doesn't exist?
I think one way that schools have been trying to convey certain messages regarding like bullying and like bias incidents is through like advisory lessons at schools. So the content is definitely being reached, but I think it's being reached in a way that's just like very basic. So not many students are kind of engaging with it and kind of like taking in that information that obviously the MCPS and like school officials would like students to know. So I think one thing that could definitely be improved is utilizing the advisory lessons for to convey these messages, but utilizing them in a way that's not just like play a video or just have like a script of slides, but more maybe create a community discussion within that advisory lesson, keep it a little bit more engaging. I feel like right now we had an advisory lesson today and it was just a very plain lesson that honestly I felt like sleeping through. I wish I could have like a more engaging like community discussion with those students who are in my advisory, so that when we walk out of that room, we take something away from what we discussed.
Urja, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just building off what Tanarika said, if I'm being like completely honest, the advisory lessons, I think a lot of people just ignore them, and a lot of people are just probably on their phones during it. I don't think it really has an impact. So I mean, I think you can make it like a community discussion. I just feel like people just wouldn't talk, at least in my classes. Maybe, I mean, I think MCPS should like explore ways to make it something more engaging. I mean, I don't know how to go about doing that though. Like maybe like if someone gave me like a chocolate for like speaking once, like I would do it like 100 times, right? So I think like doing something like that just makes, like I don't know, because um I feel like a lot of people just won't do it willingly. You need to like give them something for it.
Thank you. I want to invite Juan, Jeff, people we haven't heard from. Do you all have questions?
Sure. I do. First of all, it sounds like we got to do like a rap video or something, to get students engaged. But seriously, I did have a question in regards to whether AAPSU is working with non-Asian American groups or club, to engage them and maybe attempt to build kind of a coalition to address some of the hate incidents that is happening.
Yeah, we work closely with our countywide, like the Montgomery County Regional SGA, to just kind of hear about opportunities that they have and also be able to speak about AAPSU initiatives there, just kind of getting the word about what we are doing and how different advocates can also come, or different people can come to our events and kind of share their perspective, even if they're not Asian American. And in matters of organizations, we actually are planning on conducting an a town hall with the DOJ's like civil rights division, so that we're able to reach like all people of color And this is like more in honor of like anti-bullying month, but there will be like a focus on Asian American students, but we're definitely trying to get all color of youth there, just so that we're able to outreach just beyond the Asian American and kind of intersect the different groups of people who are impacted by bias incidents.
Okay, I want to be mindful that Tenrika, I think we exceeded, you've got to leave at 7:35 and at 7:39. If there are any other questions, maybe we could email you, and wanted to thank you. Are there any other questions that we want Urja to stay on, and can Urja stay on? Or
I have one. I've got one if that's
you
okay.
got, okay. Should
I
we
got
we release Tenrika and then direct that question to Urja? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Tenrika.
Yeah.
Before I go, can I just take a quick picture so that I can share about this wonderful event on our
Yes,
Instagram?
absolutely.
Okay. Let me just take that right now. Wait, here, we have this. Ready? Or let me take a screenshot, actually. I think that'll be a lot better.
Screenshot would be much better, I think.
Yeah. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Smile.
Sounds good. I got it. Well, it was lovely being here, and I will see you guys later. And I dropped the email in the chat if there's any additional questions afterwards. Bye.
Thank you so much, Tenrika. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Actually, that's a good segue to my question. I was going to say MCPS. I know we were talking about outreach on sort of facts and knowing your rights. Has MCPS reached out to you all about how they can better leverage social media, including TikTok and other things? Because I think that would be much more relevant than having a website with stuff on it. I just ask because you all know this stuff better than we do, and certainly what MCPS probably does. But I would think that would be a welcome opportunity.
No, yeah, I think that I think MCPS has pages, social media pages, right? But I think maybe making a student group that helps them with those things.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. I mean, you're not. I mean, it's not gonna be super exciting to follow MCPS Instagram, right? I mean, it would be more exciting to follow someone in your space who's more of an influencer. I guess that's what I'm referring to more in terms of third-party partnership in that space. And again, just when I think about how information travels, I find that travels much more substantively and with more depth. So I don't know if that's been a conversation, but certainly something I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, no one has sort of APSC takeover
something like that.
Yeah, I think maybe I honestly love the idea of just creating a student group that they get SSL hours, or even I know that when they have internships with council member Evan Glass, maybe I'm sure someone handles his social media and stuff like that, right? So just doing a similar thing with the overall main MCPS social medias. I'm not sure if MCPS has a TikTok. I haven't seen that, but I think they utilize their Instagram really well, and they have a large following, right? So I think if we get together a group of students that are interested in maybe graphics, just making social media content, I think that'd be really great. And then making sure that group is also diverse, so having AAPI students, a lot of people of color, obviously, just making sure that everyone is being heard on their and so who currently handles the social media for MCPS, if you're aware?
I'm not aware. I suspect they have.
I am familiar with that. MCPS has 2 groups. It's their Office of Communications, has one person doing social media, and then also MCPS TV has a person doing their social media. So it's 2 different groups, but I think they're both tied to MCPS Communications.
So I mean, just sort of, just an action plan, I guess. Is there anything we can do about starting to form that student group, and is that something that they're open to?
Well, I mean, I don't think we can speak for MCPS, but the task force is working to collate a series of questions that will get sent over to MCPS representatives. So this might be a question that we should include into the basket. But just thinking again, I suspect, a flyer that gets sent to people is probably not going to be as effective. So just trying to get to the place of, again, if you're trying to expand education, especially if it's, culturally and linguistically appropriate, that's probably going to have more of an impact than.
Right, and I think like student run organizations do a really great job of that. And I think that's why they're really engaging, right? Because I mean, MCPS, I think like I guess has a thing or two to learn from these student-run organizations. Like I actually am the founder of an international nonprofit that's Equality Through Education, and we make content like on the daily. I think it's like 2 posts a week, and I think overall it has really great engagement, and I think that's because it's just visually more appealing. There's less information, it's not very crowded, and I think it's just basically what students want to see. And I think if you're thinking about it, I think sometimes MCPS just makes their things like too official, but is that really what their audience wants to see is a question, right? I think if you take it from that perspective, the answer is really no. No one really wants to read like 6 slides of just like content heavy stuff. Like, I mean, I don't, and I'm really engaged in countywide education. I mean, I'm the founder of Equality Through Education, so really like it's my like area of focus. But do I really want to spend my free time like looking through that? Not really, no.
One other thing to think about, I mean, if we're talking about sort of getting interest, not just number of eyeballs, but interest in eyeballs, right? I've seen, at least on past campaigns, when you're trying to advocate for an issue, I've seen partnerships with artists, and obviously, there has to be a way to provide support for that, but having artists making physical pieces, and that could be placed at a place of meaning to highlight anti-hate issues. That might be an interesting opportunity too. So I just want to I found that to be very effective in other communities, and that, ideally would, that would be sort of a wider call, and then you could have sort of different voices and lenses, and then it could be very representative and I think very equitable. So that's something I would also just flag.
That sounds great. And I think I would honestly participate in an opportunity like that if it was publicized through the College and Career Center. They have a lot of like internships and events that people like I think sort of follow. So I think going through that sort of platform, I'm getting emails from those like College and Career Centers really like catch my eye. And I'm like, I wanna look at this opportunity. I wanna engage in this, right?
Mm-hmm. Anyways, that's it for me though. But thank you for sharing your perspectives on this. This was very helpful.
Last question, Urja. What is your sense as a student about the climate, the student school climate in terms of diversity and inclusion? And maybe you can only speak to your school, but if you've heard of sentiments at other schools, given that you've done town halls in other schools, have they stayed the same, improving, sort of dipping?
So yeah, I think it depends on like the person you ask, right? So fortunately, I go to a really diverse school. RM, I think, has a lot of like people coming in from different areas, especially because it's an international an IB school, right? But I think if you're asking me about other students as like a student leader, I think it's kind of for ESOL students, I feel like it's kind of been dipping because I was actually just talking to my friend yesterday, and he said that he's actually really good at math. So I mean, this is just an example. He's in algebra 2 right now, but he I think has the capability to sort of go into like pre-calc and higher levels. It's just that he can't follow what the teacher's saying because she speaks English, right? Really, I mean, all the things they explain are in English, and he's just not able to keep up with that. And since English is not his first language, he's being affected in other subjects as well and being sort of left behind. And I think that's really just not like I honestly just was not like okay with that, because why? I mean, there's ways to sort of combat that, I feel like. And that was sort of like a big issue that sort of arose in my mind. So yeah, I think in terms of ESOL students, I think MCPS can do a lot better. But otherwise, I think students have just done a great job like making sure that there are clubs run by them and just like opportunities where they're engaging. And I know a lot of my peers are involved in like international nonprofits like Dear Asian Youth, which sort of help just like reach out, right? And then they make like chapters in their areas. So I think that's been like a huge help. But yeah, I think more focus on ESOL students, I would say.
Okay, I might also have you consider students with special disabilities. I helped with the intervention once and that.
I think AAPSU hasn't done much for students with disabilities, but I think, yeah, obviously just, I mean, with ESOL students, making sure that they're also getting equitable resources is a must.
Great. All right. Well, I know we've taken up a lot of the students' time. Just want to do one final round. Any last burning questions? No? Okay. Urja, thank you so much to you and Apsu, and I hope this is the beginning of a few more conversations, and really appreciate you and Tenrika's time.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great meeting you all.
Nice
Thanks,
meeting you as
Robin.
well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me go back to our agenda here. All right. So, oh, yes. So we're going to go back under the vice chair reports to government relations and hear from Jeff.
Okay. So today, Ariani and I met with Jim Stowe, the director for the Office of Human Rights today. We're just trying to get understanding of his office's priorities and the current programs that they're supporting. I think two things to note. One is that they are the guardians of a hate crime restitution fund, essentially. So if you've had a hate incident happen to you, based on qualifications, you could submit for funds. So I think it was $2,000 for physical damage, and $4,000 if it was, physically directly to you. And so we had a pretty interesting discussion talking about the awareness of that fund and how that fund is supported with counsel. And I thought that was a very interesting, a notable thing to highlight. The second piece, and I think it's something that I think only highlights the importance of why we're having these conversations, but we did speak about the importance of getting diverse community leaders together, conversations, small group table discussions. I think where their office has had some challenges, I guess in the past, I guess following the economic crash in 2008, their office had much more resources in the space of community outreach and engagement. I think that those numbers have not been made whole during that time. And so I think there was an appreciation for having other grassroots leaders and others helping to support that space, trying to, reinvigorate sort of a closer neighborhood connection point. I think Ariani's called it navigators in this space. But I think that piece was very welcome. And you'll have to forgive me, I had to leave the meeting early, but Ariani, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to highlight with our conversation with the director, but I thought it was substantive. And also just to say that there is a picnic on the, 29th, 30th that's coming up, and there might be an opportunity for us to do some outreach there at Wheaton Regional Park.
Yeah, so just two things to kind of reiterate on the navigators. This is something that I've been promoting, even outside of Montgomery County, which is, designates to help impacted parties navigate different systems. So it might be, the court system. Sometimes certain court systems have a victims advocate, social service system for different types of issues. It might be trying to land the victims fund. They're available county, state, national levels. There's private ones as well. There's the language piece of it. They might need some interpretation, may need a buffer, a spokesperson to communicate with the media. And so there might be several different designates, but the ideal thing would be if there's one who could stay as a constant companion by the side of the person who's, traumatized, because in that state, they don't want to be ping-ponging, around many different groups and just sort of being approached by well-meaning, community leaders, media, politicians, what have you. So when I was raising this with Jim Stowe, he also agreed that, you know, there needs to be a sort of a trusted person. And so even before his time coming into the role, there was a program called, I think it was called Network of Neighbors. And that was sort of maybe casualty of the downturn in the budget cuts. I'm not sure what happened there, but that's something I think it's worth resurrecting, because I've seen this in other parts of the country. And what happens is that there's volunteers who have to step up, like an executive director, like a police officer. So they're assuming this collateral role on top of their full-time job because the need is there. So I know the need is there. So in my previous day job, I tried to get these navigators funded in different cities for different communities, but something like that there already seems to have, you know, been an understanding of that need and an interest in an actual program. So I think that's worth looking at a little bit more closely. The other thing is, even in our conversation, there was a lot of new information, and we all coexist in the county with our diverse cohorts, but we don't actually have opportunities to sit down and talk in a meaningful way. So we talked about meeting with the Committee on Hate and Violence and having some diverse guests and sort of mingle, alternatively holding like in private spaces, maybe there are conversation tables, there are a lot of facilitation guides, you know, by different organizations, NPR, just so that people really get to know each other and share, you know, their life, their personal experiences, their background, you know, just to kind of, you know, build that cross empathy and understanding. And, you know, by virtue of just knowing other people, you can also be ambassadors, you know, for other communities as well. So those are the only two things that I remember talking about after you left, Jeff. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So let me skip to the discussion on the Jamboard, unless Nazneen, May, did you need a little bit more time here while we're convened to talk about the Jamboard, or are you good until you meet?
I think we're good. May?
I'd agree. We'll save our time. We'll have a good chat later.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then I'm going to move down the agenda to our discussion on the Jamboard. We're going to 8:30, correct? Okay, so we have about 35 minutes, 34 minutes. So let me share screen here. Going to our Jamboard. Okay, so I skipped over the slides related to youth and schools, and now we're in our second category of 3, which is the AAPI community. And what I did here was take the Post-its where we had brainstormed some ideas, and in addition to categorizing them in 3 different buckets, try to characterize the strategies. You know, are they reactive? Are they interventionist? Are they preventative? And so along the left column here, you see, you know, those strategies, and working your way across, their Post-its that sort of comport with that type of strategy. And looking at these set of Post-its that I'm encircling here at the very top, that are reactive, you know, one theme that I saw was communication, but I wanted to open it up to you to see if you saw any other characterizations or threads and ideas coming out of these ideas.
I think the one thing I'm noticing is communication is not just in the reactive thing, but I think it needs to be a through line in all of them, right? Like, I think what we heard even from the students is like, there's stuff out there, but people aren't known. And even you just said, like, you were in this meeting with Jim Stowe, and just in this meeting, you learned a lot of new things. And so you think you're communicating, but it needs a lot more iteration throughout. And so I would just think that communication is key throughout all 3 strategies: the preventative, interventionist, and reactive.
Okay, thank you. May have added those into the text box here on the far right, which is meant just to kind of encapsulate like larger themes. Anything else? Okay, so let's go to the second row, which is interventionist. And here, so now we have added communication. I talked about those navigators, the quarterly roundtable. Yeah, that speaks to communication. Is there any other nuances that we want to tease out and write down as a summary of those ideas? Okay, moving down to the third row then, we have many more ideas here under the preventative strategies. So we tried to summarize this in terms of, again, we start off with communication. There was proposed education directing toward the community on, let's see, did I say law? The law and hate crimes, what it is, what it's not. Education that's directed toward the government, and this is more about, I think, training on AAPIs. Okay. There are a couple of post-its on representation in terms of hiring within institutions and funding, funding for staff and community-based organizations. And then this last piece was government, small business support. I think that related to patrol units, just to connect with small businesses who are targets of bias. And then there was one posted on the change of the law to facilitate prosecution. Do these accurately capture what's on these post-its, or do you have any additional ones?
I'm wondering if communication just sounds vague, because I'm also starting to think it's really about education and awareness raising about like what's out there. Yeah, I'm just seeing like we're saying create PSAs, but it's to the goal, the why is to raise awareness and stuff. And I feel like it's one of the strategies on outreach that overlaps with some of these other things here.
Yeah, I would agree. I think communication is, I mean, it's an overarching theme and everything, but I think just saying communication doesn't really say what we mean. And I think that if we, it's sort of, it has to be a part of like the education plus public awareness, training on government, education and training for government is also, making sure that part of that training is communication with the broader community.
Okay. Okay, so I'm making some adjustments here in the summaries. Do these more accurately encapsulate what your feedback was? Anything missing? Okay, so go ahead.
I was gonna say, I was just like ticking through like some of the things that I hear in advocacy, like it takes leadership, it takes infrastructure, it takes funding, and so like I see that representation and leadership, right? Some of these are infrastructure, it takes funding. So I'm just trying to think like, what else am I missing here?
Yeah, infrastructure.
Oh, I think the others like what gets measured gets done, and so what are the key measures that we're trying to track here? I guess that was the last thing that I was starting to come to.
Oh, metrics. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Infrastructure, leadership, and what about also capacity building for organizations?
Yes. Maybe data and metrics. Okay, I need to move this over here. Okay, so let me take a shot at trying to summarize it, because our goal here with this slide is to land on a recommendation. So let me take a shot at it and see if we can kind of finesse it into a recommendation. So in terms of the actors who would materialize some of these, ideas, I see government agencies, one, I see community-based organizations, and then sort of a interplay, but and the community, and an interplay between all of them. So let's start with community-based organizations. I hear capacity building support for community-based organizations, which translates into funding and staff that enables them to advocate for things like, increased representation, across the government, things like support for the community, training, and outreach, like the PSAs in ethnic languages. Does that land with you in terms of and trying to distill this third row?
It does, and I guess the "and" that's coming to mind is actually the question you posed to us yesterday, Ariani, because I feel like the this board, the AAPI community, you asked a question yesterday of like, we're gonna have these cross policy recommendations that is gonna go across all the cohorts, but what is unique to the AAPI community? And so just wanted to share that again because it just underlines some of the linguistical things and the comment we had yesterday of like this lens where the AAPI community are always seen as the outsider. And so like when we talk about awareness and trainings and cultural comms, like talking about the AAPI community as included and as part of the community and not like, tokenized and outside. So for just adding that additional nuance of like when we talk about education and public awareness raising, like what that means, so that we're fighting that stereotype, I guess.
And when you're looking at community-based organizations within the county that work with the AAPI community, a lot of it does go to funding and the ability to actually do the work that's needed for the AAPI community. I think that many times AAPI organizations are funded at a lower rate than other organizations, and that really does impact in the amount of work that they are able to do within the county with the community. And I think that sometimes there are other organizations that don't, that the community they serve seems to be larger, but that is also, I think, because as we've said in the past, the AAPI community does not always advocate for themselves, especially those that really need services.
Yes, you're right. And nationally, we know for 20 years, the funding has been from the foundation side, something like 0.07% or something like that, something very low, a comparable rate from corporations as well. So let's see, I have that down, address traditional low rate of funding of API community-based organizations. And then there was something very important that I wanted to capture here as well. Oh, advocacy. Okay, support for advocacy. Okay.
And just because I know you all are leaders of different organizations, if you're not aware of the Cherry Blossom Giving Circle and the Asian Americans and Philanthropy Group, like those are places to apply for funding.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we have sort of exhausted the conversation about API community-based organizations. Now, is there a recommendation here for the county government to support API community-based organizations outside of the grants. And here I'm zeroing in on this. The language piece has come up several times. I think what will come out of the survey that Juan's working out on is, where do community members receive their news or information on government and nonprofit resources? And, you know, are those connections being made where community members are turning for that information and sources?
Yeah, I think that that's an important one, because I do know that, you know, when I get notices from the county, there's the English version, there's the Spanish version, but that's it. I don't know if there are ones that go out that are targeted to certain community members, but those are the ones that I receive. And, you know, I'm part of the Asian Pacific Advisory Group, and I know that, you know, I think that that's an issue that's been brought up, but, you know, because there are so many languages, it's hard to sometimes make sure that all the communications are in those in the different languages that are needed, unless someone brings it up and then they're like, oh, okay, we can translate it for you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think even some of the flyers and information they shared, when I reached back out and was like, hey, I'd like to share like the fund that Jeff mentioned, at our neighborhood national night out, they didn't have it in the languages needed, because I had requested, I was like, hey, there's a lot of Amharic, there's a lot of Vietnamese in my community, and they didn't have anything. So I found like some other, you could also tell like what was provided that was translated was not, it didn't look exactly like the same version. So I think the linguistic thing is a key piece, but I'm also, what's raising for me is like, while there might not be a key policy piece, I think there's some key things that's being lifted to me like as a lens that we might want to look at every single policy recommendation that comes out. Like, does this account for the linguistical needs? Does this account for like making sure everyone is included in that American history is not treated as outsiders? I think there's definitely some themes here that I just also think we should be looking at whatever comes out with like that additional lens of like, how is this attending to our community?
Yeah, and to support both your comments about the need for language support, a couple of years ago, worked on a project where I was surveying community organizations that served API communities, because the ones that were at the county and state level were outdated by several years. And even in calling each of those organizations, sometimes they didn't have an online presence, or by phone didn't have an English speaker. So that is sort of a baseline, getting the materials translated. And then, you know, being able to post that where they're seeing news. So for example, for several Chinese American speakers, they're using WeChat, which is it's a platform. Koreans use Kakao Talk, Taiwanese Line. Are these notices and press releases, are they making their way to those channels? We don't. Hopefully, and that would be like, I think, an important piece to this outreach.
Yeah, Ariane, I always said that we looked into WeChat just because we know so many of our clients use it, and there were a lot of issues with using it as a nonprofit, and because of who runs it and all of that. So unfortunately, that may be an issue if we're trying to, if for recommendations of using certain some of those platforms, because of who has access to them.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And so we can talk more about that. I think it's a difficult thing, because if there's one side to perspectives or a lack of information, that space does also become a echo chamber. Yeah. Okay. And there's also print and radio and TV, so maybe there's alternatives as well. to reach those folks. So, okay, so that's one. Is there anything else related to what a recommendation that's directed to the government to connect to engage, to serve API community members?
So I may have mentioned this before, but certainly, get funding for community organizations to do outreach in language appropriate way. But and that can be combined with the public service announcements, or if the county provides the PSA, and maybe they can't do it in different languages, but at least have subtitles, and then have the organizations reach help get that message out to their communities. I think that would be helpful.
Maybe put an additional sort of side point to the piece related to advocacy in language. I know we talk about funding for capacity building for CBOs, but to what extent should this be expanded to include ethnic media organizations and other entities? I just ask in terms of information exchange and capacity in that space seems to be quite important. I don't know if folks here feel strongly about that, but it's something I think could be very compelling.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think organizations, can use, I guess, whatever ethnic media that they normally use to get the message out, in addition to doing their own outreach. But I know my organizations, we've used television, radio, Vietnamese television, cable channels, internet radio in Vietnamese, as well as Vietnamese print media. So
I was going to say, like, I know the community relations person for NBC, and I know they work closely with Telemundo. I don't know the community relations person for like the Asian media, but I do know for the community relations division of NBC, one of their priority areas is safety. I did bring up this whole task force to them, and they seemed interested, because safety is one of their priorities. But was wondering, like, if anyone knew, like, the community relations person and more Asian focused media. I'm not connected there.
So NBC being the mainstream media, right?
Mhm.
They've done a piece was like a year or two ago, and I was on it, and then Asian American Justice Center was on it, and it was about bias crimes in the DMV area. So but it is right for another follow-up report, because that was a couple of years ago. They haven't done one since.
So offline, if there we want to have ideas, Ariani, I can try to password on there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. So I think we have distilled it down to, at least I can see two major prongs. I'll finesse the language and bring it back to you, make sure that it really encapsulates our discussion. And then let's see, in the remaining 13 minutes, let us move to the next category. And good job, everyone. That was probably, the larger conversation of the two. So now we're on cross communication, and to a certain extent, when we're talking about the readout on the meeting with Director Stowe, we did touch upon some of these things. Again, I'm going to take the same approach and ask you to see if you can kind of summarize some, themes here by row. So here in the reactive row, in the very top row, what could we say to summarize these two ideas?
I'm seeing like transparency and reporting and data.
Okay, transparency and reporting and data. Okay. Oops. Okay.
I think it's a little more, it also is, it's not only the transparency of reporting and data, but also the impact, or the impact of hate and bias crimes on different communities.
Okay. Thank you. That's very important. Anything else, or should we move on to the second row? Okay, so here we've got 5 ideas under interventionist. Let's see. Okay, I see check marks, and I think that denoted that someone seconded that idea. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
think,
zero in on that. Yeah.
yeah. I think I was the only one who went in to do that because those are my check marks. I think that was the
Okay.
assignment, and I was just like, yep, there we go. So
Okay. So I think, how about I put, oops, okay. Response plan and maybe preparation. Okay. Any other?
I think that upstander training or the bystander training has been mentioned a lot, but the need for it. I think a lot of people are like, okay, now I know what it is, but I don't know how to intervene, right? Like I feel like that's where we are in this phase of like we're getting to a little bit better of like we know what hate biases and hate incidents are, but now we don't quite know what to do about them, report them, intervene, all those type of things. And that's where I see like the second and fifth post-it seem to focus on those types of
Yeah,
trainings.
that's right. That's right. Okay. What do you all think about the resource list? Maybe this already exists in one of the reports or 2 of the reports. The AG has one, the county has one. Human Rights Commission may have one.
I think it's a good idea. I don't know if they have it. I felt like it fell under the response plan and preparation. Like it's gather the resources, share them.
Yeah, but I think that part of that is and it's going to go back to communication, but communicating to communicating to the public where they can find resources. You know, because I think that a lot of times we're like, oh yeah, there are resources out there, but where are they? How can they find them? You know, is there someone who can help them navigate what the resources are, and you know where they should connect?
Yes, and are there some helpful API serving organizations who could supplement those services? Okay.
I mean, something that I think is coming up even just in your conversations with Ariane and Jeff and you reaching out to the government relations places is like just the communications. Like you're all leaders that are really thickly in it, and yet you're still learning about new programs and services that you didn't know before. And so I just feel like we keep saying communication awareness raising, but it's just like we need more opportunities to be together. Like what is the glue that binds us and helps us like get information shared more frequently and be in touch more frequently besides relying on digital email blasts.
Okay, great, thank you. I think we captured those. Okay, let's move on to the preventive strategies here.
I think with the preventative, it's really working with each of the different subgroups, and learning about, learning about them, right? Learning about the different communities, and engaging with them. Because I think that, one of the issues is not understanding, or everybody has biases, and it's allowing those biases to really make more of a negative impact on how you deal with certain communities. So maybe that's the education piece. Part of the education piece here is educating, is educating communities on, or understanding understanding different communities. I'm not sure, I'm not doing very well in putting that together, but I think you sort of know what I mean, I hope.
Yes. Learn about, inform, engage. Okay. Thank you. This might be the thrust of the whole slide, actually. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna just say, like, deepening understanding between communities, deepening understanding and support between communities.
Yeah. And it's not just communities of color, but it's the LGBTQ community as well. Because I think that, there are a lot of biases against that community that go across culture, across religion, that needs to be really, you need to understand these communities.
Yeah, and
No,
Go ahead,
please,
Jeff.
please go ahead, May. I'll go after you.
I was gonna just underline what Nazneen said, because I think there's a stigma within the Asian community of LGBTQ plus community as well, right? Like, I know even in my own household, if my mom says something that's not quite right in front of the kids, I have to be like, oh well, that's trying to lovingly correct my mom in front of my kids, right? Like, so I think having that cross solidarity is really, really important to show support for the entire community, but just kind of recognizing, like, Asians who are in that LGBTQ would probably need that extra solidarity support somewhere because they may not be getting it in their own family.
Yeah, and I think it's also making sure that people understand the negative connotation that certain words or certain characterizations have, not just for the LGBTQ community, but for other racial and ethnic groups as well. I know we were asked to do, my Stop Anti-Asian Hate attorney was asked to do a know your rights on, terminology for an older, for older, a certain older community, API community. And she was just like, I just never thought of this, that, these are words that they say. And it's like, no, you can't say those words. Those are not, they have a negative connotation. And yet, it's making sure that it's making that older community understand that these are not acceptable terms, and what impact it has if they do use them.
This is my comment here is, I would say, adjacent to what we're talking about. If we're talking about cross community groups, the area that I've struggled to figure out how we can have a stronger linkage, and I understand that council and the executive obviously are overseeing government outreach in this space and community outreach, but I think the private sector and businesses that are housed here in the county, they should be a part of these dialogues and discussions. If we talk about hate incidents, the workplace has to be up there, top 2, top 3 in terms of areas where this is happening. And I don't know how this, fits into some of the other buckets we're talking about, but I just want to make sure we have a place where we can have that conversation. Maybe it's through the chambers, maybe it's through the ethnic chambers, whatever it might be. I just think that I think there's a growing understanding that these are important HR, not just HR practices. These are sort of important values in the corporate space. And obviously, given the county's interest in being an innovator or creating important linkages economically, I think this is one of these conversations that does need to be broached. Might be a little outside this zone of our scope, but if you're talking about bystander training and upstanding training and, you know, these response and plans, how's the private sector not a part of that? So that's something I just want to put in there. It might not fit here, but it's something that I had not heard in the conversations that I popped into to date, someone talk about that. So I think I just want to put that in there for us to at least think about.
Yeah, I will say that a lot of law firms are now doing they have DEI, and they have diversity, inclusion, and oh my God, I'm forgetting one word. That's terrible. Thank you, equity. They have a lot of DEI groups, and you know, it's really, and I will tell you from a nonprofit standpoint, I know that almost every application I do now for a grant asks me what I'm doing about DEI. So I do think that it's something that a lot of private firms and private companies are really looking at as well. But I think you're right, Jeff, and is how do we make sure that within this county, the businesses, especially the smaller private businesses, are taking on that work and understanding that it is an important part of who they are and how are they represented within the county.
I mean, yeah, I do think, you know, your big biotech companies here probably have a key role in this, but I think to your point, any small business that is employing under, let's say, 20 people, I mean, that's a significant culture piece as well. So just something I just want to make sure I echoed that.
I was just going to add from my seat working in a nonprofit, I feel like we're talking about DEI. Actually, I try to push to be JEDI. It's a missed opportunity, guys. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. JEDI officers. But that in nonprofits, we're talking about these DEI often and a lot. But in my conversations with corporations, they're really just talking about D, right? Like diversity and representation. They're not really talking about equity and inclusion. And they might have affinity groups to just socialize and bond, but it's not really talking about equity and change and things like that. So thank you, Jeff, for bringing that up, because I do think, like, when I think of like the curve of like who's talking about this more, kind of put nonprofits and CEOs out there in the forefront, and then because foundations are granting to them there, and then corporations are still talking about mainly diversity. So I think that's an area that could be helped. I don't know. I can't think of the policy recommendation at the moment that's going to help with that, besides just education. And then the one thing I was going to say that I think Nazneen brought up a little bit earlier was I can't remember exactly what you said, Nazneen, but it just kind of reminded me, like, when we talk about PSA and awareness, we're in this cohort, in this task force, we're often talking about hate bias incidents against Asians. But I do want to raise the question of, like, if we also need to, like, be real about some of the work we have to do within the Asian community and the biases that we have toward each other and other groups outside the Asian community, because we're not like all getting along. I mean, I definitely feel a lot of tension even in college of like the Chinese Student Association versus the Shanghai Student Association versus the Hong Kong Student Association versus the Taiwanese Student Association, and they didn't play well together. So just throw that out there to just kind of be like there's some work to do even within this Asian cohort, and so all of these things need to be like heavily like focused on like how do we fight biases within our own community, and then again also I'm really interested in like how do we also make sure we're addressing biases in our community against other groups.
Yeah, that's a really great point that I might put into the recommendation about AAPI community, because that's sort of an intro community work. But what I'm seeing in terms of shaping a recommendation here, and I'm looking particularly at the beginning of this language at the bottom row, second from the right, post-it, a cross solidarity initiative that would bring different community leaders together and work in all these other sub points, whether that's the response plan, the bystander training, ensuring that there's adequate communication to the public about available resources, and having cross communications across those groups. ensuring transparent data and speaking about the impact on communities and, just continuing to deepen the understanding across different communities. And I think all of that could kind of fall within this umbrella recommendation of continuing the work with with an entity, whatever form that would take, the continuation of this task force, an alliance, a coalition, what have you. So what do you think about that? Okay, May's nodding. Yeah, slight nod, other nods. Okay, great. All right, so I think we actually did finish the work. I just want to flash really quickly. There's, in terms of an announcement. Okay. I know we're going over, but just wanted to flash. This is the announcement. There's 2 events. We talked about that picnic Jim Stowe told us about at Wheaton. That was on the right. And then there's another one that was given to us by Lon at Howard County. And so if you're interested in either of these 2 events, I'm happy to give you a larger version of them.
Yes, please.
Thingy offline. But I think that is we've reached the end of our agenda. We just need to figure out another meeting, and then offline I'll provide you some dates for the mixer. I actually should check in with the larger task force too about interest as well as availability. So with that, I just want to say, we covered a lot of ground and we did it. And so I know there's concern about whether we're going to make it, but we did it in 2 meetings. So congratulations all. And want to thank the county staff for staying on a little bit later. Have a wonderful night and good job, everyone.
All right, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.